My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 58, and I thought I knew heartbreak. I was wrong. True heartbreak is watching your daughter humiliate you at her wedding in front of 300 guests. But when a stranger whispered 4 words that changed everything, I had no idea this nightmare would become something extraordinary. What he was hiding would destroy everything and save me. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. They say a mother's proudest moment is watching her daughter walk down the aisle. Mine was watching her pretend I didn't exist. The hotel loomed before me like something out of a fairy tale. All white columns and crystal chandeliers that caught the Charleston sunlight and threw it back in 1,000 glittering pieces. I'd seen pictures of places like this in magazines, the kind Sophie used to flip through as a teenager, pointing at dresses and venues and whispering, "Someday, Mom, someday." Well, someday had arrived. I smoothed down the front of my dress, a simple navy thing I'd sewn myself over 3 evenings, my fingers cramping around the needle the way they always did now. Arthritis, the doctor said. Just part of getting older. At 58, I was collecting a lot of parts of getting older. The wedding coordinator met me at the entrance, her smile tight and professional. She had the look of someone who'd perfected the art of seeing through people. Her eyes flicked over my homemade dress, my practical shoes, the small clutch I'd bought at a discount store. "You must be the bride's mother," she said, though it sounded more like a question she already regretted asking. "Margaret Collins," I said, extending my hand. She shook it briefly, her fingers cool and limp. "Of course, right this way." I followed her through the grand ballroom, past tables draped in ivory silk, past centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The room smelled like expensive flowers and richer perfume. Every surface seemed to shine. She led me to the far corner, where the lighting dimmed and the decorations thinned. A small placard sat in the center of the table, table 14. "Courtesy guests." Something cold settled in my chest. "Here we are," she said brightly, as if she'd just seated me at the head table. "Enjoy the ceremony." I stood there, staring at that card, "Courtesy guests." The words felt heavy, deliberate. This wasn't an oversight. This was a choice. Slowly, I sank into the chair. Around me, other courtesy guests were arriving. An elderly man who introduced himself as Ethan's high school teacher. A distant aunt who kept checking her phone. The estate's gardener still looking uncomfortable in his rented suit. We were the obligatory invites. The people you couldn't not invite, but desperately hoped wouldn't come. I'd sewn Sophie's Halloween costumes. I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning helping her build a solar system model in 5th grade. I'd worked 2 jobs, days at the public library, nights taking in sewing from neighbors, to pay for her college tuition. Every birthday, every holiday, every skinned knee and broken heart, and she'd put me with the gardener from across the room. I saw her. Sophie, my daughter. She looked like a princess from those magazines she used to read. Her dress a cascade of French lace, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist. She was laughing at something one of her bridesmaids said, her hand resting on the arm of her fiancé, Ethan. Tall, handsome, successful, everything I'd wanted for her. She glanced in my direction. Our eyes met for just a moment. Then she looked away. Not a nod, not a smile, nothing. I pressed my napkin against my lap, my hands shaking slightly. The elderly teacher beside me was talking about the weather, or maybe the flowers. I couldn't really hear him over the rushing in my ears. The ceremony began. I watched my daughter marry a man I'd met exactly twice. I watched her promise forever to someone whose last name I still struggled to remember. And through it all, I sat at table 14, in the shadows, among the forgotten. When the ceremony ended and guests moved toward the reception, a terrible thought occurred to me. This was only the beginning of the evening. I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. Dinner arrived on plates that looked like art installations. I pushed a piece of salmon around, my appetite gone, replaced by a gnawing anxiety that made every bite feel like swallowing stones. Around me, table 14 had fallen into uncomfortable silence. We were the island of the unwanted, surrounded by a sea of laughter and clinking glasses. At the head table, Sophie threw her head back at something Ethan whispered, her happiness so bright it hurt to look at. I remembered her at 7, gap-toothed and grinning, showing me a drawing she'd made. "That's you, Mama," she'd said, pointing to a stick figure with a crown. "You're the queen of our house. When had I become the jester instead?" The master of ceremonies, a polished man in a burgundy suit, tapped his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a wonderful tradition here. We'd love to invite anyone who'd like to share a memory or a funny story about our beautiful couple to come up and say a few words." A groomsman went first, telling a story about Ethan's failed attempt at surfing. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Then one of Sophie's college friends shared something about a road trip to Miami. More laughter. Then Sophie herself stood, reaching for the microphone. My heart lurched. Maybe she'd say something kind. Maybe she'd acknowledge the sacrifices, the love, the years. Maybe in front of all these people, she'd remember who raised her. She cleared her throat, her smile dazzling under the chandelier light. "I want to talk about my mother for a moment." Every cell in my body went still. My mom always had these interesting ideas about life. Her tone was light, almost teasing, but something underneath it made my skin prickle. She used to tell me that love was more important than money. The success wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in kindness. A few people made soft awe sounds. Sophie's smile sharpened. "But you know what? Look where that philosophy got her." She gestured towards my corner, and I felt every eye in the room turn to me like searchlights. Sitting over there at table 14, with the people nobody really wanted at their wedding. The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone laughed, a nervous titter that spread like disease through the crowd. Not everyone joined in, but enough did, enough to make my face burn, my hands shake, my vision blur. The elderly teacher beside me stared at his plate. The gardener shifted uncomfortably. The distant aunt suddenly found her phone fascinating. Sophie handed back the microphone, still smiling, and sat down. Ethan squeezed her hand. Several guests raised their glasses in her direction. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing closer, the air thickening until it was impossible to draw it into my lungs. I thought of the nights I'd skipped meals so Sophie could have new shoes, the times I'd sewn until my fingers bled to pay for her school trips, the Mother's Day cards she used to make covered in glitter and crayon hearts, promising she'd love me forever. This was my forever. I gripped the edge of the table, preparing to stand, to leave, to disappear into the Charleston night and never look back. My daughter didn't want me here. She'd made that abundantly clear. But before I could push my chair back, something unexpected happened. A man stood up several tables away. I'd noticed him earlier. Tall, mid-40s maybe, wearing a navy suit that looked expensive without being showy. Dark hair, strong jawline, the kind of presence that made people pause. He was walking toward me. The room noticed. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Even Sophie stopped mid-laugh, her expression shifting to confusion. He reached my table and stopped beside my chair. When he looked down at me, his eyes were warm, kind, and filled with something that looked almost like recognition. Then he leaned in and whispered 4 words that changed everything. "Pretend you're with me." Before I could respond, before I could process what was happening, he placed his hand gently on the back of my chair and addressed the room in a voice that commanded attention. "Excuse me, everyone. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." My heart hammered against my ribs as the stranger's hand rested on my chair. The entire ballroom had gone silent, 300 people collectively holding their breath. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying across the room with effortless authority, "is not here alone. She's with me." I stared at him, my mouth slightly open, unable to form words. Who was this man? What was he doing? He must have sensed my panic because he glanced down at me with the smallest smile, reassuring, conspiratorial, before turning back to the crowd. "I apologize for the confusion. I was delayed and couldn't escort Margaret in properly." He said my name like we'd known each other for years. "But I assure you all, she is most certainly not sitting with people nobody wanted. She's sitting exactly where I asked her to wait for me." Sophie had gone pale, even from across the room. I could see the color drain from her face. Ethan leaned in, whispering something urgent in her ear. The stranger extended his hand to me. "Shall we?" I took it without thinking, his palm warm and steady against mine, and let him help me to my feet. My legs felt like water. but his grip kept me anchored. For those who don't know me, he continued, addressing the room with the ease of someone accustomed to being heard. My name is Michael Reed. I'm one of the primary investors in Ethan's tech venture. He paused, letting that information settle. And Margaret here is one of the most remarkable women I've had the pleasure of knowing. The shift in the room was instant and visceral. I watched it happen in real time. Faces that had been smirking or pitying now rearranged themselves into expressions of interest, respect, even envy. Money had its own gravity, apparently, and Michael Reed's name carried weight. Sophie stood abruptly, smoothing down her dress. She was smiling, but it looked painted on, fragile. Mr. Reed, I had no idea you knew my mother. Oh, yes, Michael said smoothly. He turned to me, his eyes twinkling with mischief. We met at the hospital charity gala last spring. Didn't we, Margaret? I managed a small nod, my voice still trapped somewhere in my throat. We had the most fascinating conversation about community service and the real meaning of success. He looked back at Sophie, and something in his expression hardened just slightly. Your mother has quite a lot to teach people about what truly matters. A bridesmaid rushed over with a glass of champagne, pressing it into my hand. A groomsman I'd never met suddenly wanted to know about my work with charities. The transformation was dizzying, from invisible to suddenly visible, all because a stranger had decided to give me his borrowed light. Michael guided me away from table 14 toward the dance floor as a new song began. I finally found my voice. I don't understand, I whispered. Why are you doing this? He placed one hand at my waist, took my other hand in his, and began to lead me in a simple waltz. He was a good dancer, confident, gentle, making it easy for me to follow, despite my trembling legs, because what she did was cruel, he said quietly, his breath warm near my ear. And nobody deserves to be humiliated like that, especially not by their own child. But you don't even know me. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Old pain, old memory. No, but I knew someone like you once. We moved across the floor, and the crowd parted like water. I caught glimpses of faces as we passed. Some curious, some approving, some confused. Sophie stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, anger, regret. When the song ended, Michael didn't immediately release me. Instead, he leaned in, his voice so low only I could hear. You didn't deserve what happened tonight, and there's something else you should know. Something about your daughter's new husband. His jaw tightened. But not here. And not now. Can we talk somewhere private, after this is over? Ice ran down my spine. What do you mean? The garden, he said. Meet me in the garden in 20 minutes, please. Before I could respond, he was ushering me back toward my table, except now people were standing, offering me their seats at better tables, pressing business cards into my hand, asking about my charity work. I watched Michael disappear into the crowd, leaving me alone with a terrible new question burning in my mind. What did he know about Ethan? The garden was a sprawling maze of boxwood hedges and climbing roses, lit by strings of fairy lights that turned everything soft and dreamlike. I found Michael standing by a stone fountain, his back to me, hands in his pockets. The sound of the reception was muted here, distant laughter and music floating on the night air like ghosts of celebration. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said without turning around. I wasn't sure I should. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warm Charleston evening. Mr. Reed. Michael. He turned to face me. In the soft light, he looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. Please, just Michael. Michael? The name felt strange in my mouth. I need to understand what's happening. That thing you did in there was necessary. He moved closer, his expression serious. I couldn't sit there and watch anymore. But why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant, focused on something I couldn't see. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. 3 months ago, I was at a pitch meeting for early-stage investors in Ethan's company. Sophie was there, charming, confident, exactly the kind of person who seems to have it all figured out. He paused. After the formal presentation, a few of us went for drinks. Sophie had a few too many, started talking. My stomach dropped. What did she say? She told stories about her childhood, about her mother, you, who she called a failure. She laughed about how you worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford to send her to a private school, how you wore the same coat for 15 years, how embarrassing it was to have friends over to your shabby little house. His hands clenched at his sides. She said she'd worked hard to distance herself from all that poverty and small-minded thinking. Each word was a knife. I'd known Sophie was ashamed of me, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the specific cruelties she'd shared with strangers, made something crack inside my chest. The others laughed along, Michael continued, but I didn't, because I kept thinking about my own mother. He moved to sit on the fountain's edge, gesturing for me to join him. I did, my legs grateful for the support. My mother cleaned houses, he said softly. 6 days a week on her hands and knees, scrubbing other people's floors so I could have music lessons and tutoring. She wore clothes from thrift stores. She never complained, never asked for anything. His voice broke slightly. She died when I was 23, right before I sold my first company. She never got to see me succeed, never got to know that all her sacrifices meant something. Tears blurred my vision. I'm so sorry. She used to say the same thing Sophie mocked you for, that love mattered more than money, that kindness was its own success. He looked at me directly. When I heard Sophie ridiculing you for the exact values my mother died believing in, something in me just broke. I promised myself that if I ever met you, I'd make sure you knew your worth. So you came to the wedding specifically to see if you'd be here, to see if Sophie would actually invite the mother she'd spent months bad-mouthing. His jaw tightened. I didn't plan the dramatic rescue, but when she humiliated you in front of everyone, I couldn't just sit there. We sat in silence for a moment, the fountain trickling behind us. A night bird called somewhere in the darkness. There's more, Michael said finally. Something you need to know about Ethan, about why I'm really worried. Tell me. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through documents. I've been conducting due diligence on his company. Margaret, the numbers don't add up. There are contracts that appear fabricated, investors who may not exist, financial statements that contradict each other. He looked up at me. I think Ethan is running some kind of fraud. The world tilted. No, Sophie wouldn't. Sophie probably doesn't know, but she signed documents. Her name is on several contracts as Chief Marketing Officer. He showed me a scanned signature. My daughter's looping handwriting. If this comes out, if authorities investigate, she could be implicated as an accomplice. Oh God, I've been trying to warn them for weeks, but Ethan keeps brushing me off. And after hearing how Sophie talks about you, I suspect she wouldn't listen either. She's too caught up in this new life. He closed his phone. I think this wedding, this whole elaborate show, is Ethan's attempt to legitimize himself before everything falls apart. My mind raced. Sophie, cruel as she'd been, was still my daughter, still the little girl who'd held my hand crossing streets, who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. What happens when it comes out? I whispered. That depends on how deep she's in, at best. Public scandal and financial ruin, at worst. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Prison. He was talking about prison. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything. Sophie's cruelty, Michael's revelation, the documents with my daughter's signature. By the time dawn crept through my bedroom curtains, I'd nearly worn a path in the carpet from pacing. My phone had been buzzing since midnight. I'd turned it off, unable to face whatever was happening. Now, in the gray morning light, I powered it back on. 347 notifications. My hands shook as I scrolled through them. Facebook messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, text messages from former co-workers, even an email from the library director where I used to work. Then I saw it, the video. Someone had recorded the moment Michael defended me. It was everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok. The caption on the most popular version read, "Mystery man rescues humiliated mother at daughter's wedding." The most elegant gesture of the night. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of them. That daughter should be ashamed. This man is a king. I'm crying. This is what real class looks like. Someone find out who he is. There were follow-up posts too. Screenshots of people trying to identify Michael. Speculation about our relationship. Think pieces about family dynamics and social status. Local Charleston news sites had picked up the story. Wedding drama goes viral. Investor defends guest after daughter's cruel joke. My chest tightened. This was exactly what Sophie would hate most. Public scrutiny, the wrong kind of attention, as if summoned by the thought. My phone rang. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but some old instinct, mother's instinct, I suppose, made me press accept. What the hell did you do? Sophie's voice was shrill, barely controlled. Do you have any idea what you've done? Sophie, I didn't. You made a scene. You embarrassed me in front of everyone, and now it's all over the internet. Our wedding, my wedding, is a joke now because of you and your stunt with that investor. Something hot and sharp rose in my throat. My stunt, Sophie. I didn't ask him to. Oh, please. You expect me to believe you didn't plan this? That you didn't somehow arrange for Michael Reed, of all people, to swoop in and play hero? You couldn't stand it, could you? Couldn't stand that for once. I had something beautiful that had nothing to do with you. That's not fair. Fair? She laughed. A harsh sound. You want to talk about fair? Do you know how much this wedding cost? How many people I had to invite? And you just had to make yourself the center of attention. You put me at table 14, Sophie. You told 300 people I was a failure. Silence. Then colder. I never said the word failure. You implied it. In front of everyone. I made a joke, Mom. It was supposed to be funny, but you had to turn it into this big dramatic thing. Getting your boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend. I'd never met him before last night. Then why did he defend you? Why did he lie about knowing you? Her voice rose. Do you know what Ethan's saying now? That you probably slept with Reed to get him to do this? That you're trying to sabotage our marriage because you're jealous? The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to silence. Slowly, I lowered it, staring at my reflection in the darkened screen. I looked old, tired, small. The phone buzzed again. Not Sophie this time, but a text from an unknown number. It's Michael. I hope you don't mind that I got your number from the wedding coordinator. Are you okay? I'm seeing the news coverage. I stared at the message. Then another came through. We need to talk. Soon. Things are moving faster than I expected with Ethan's situation. Can we meet? There's something you need to see. My hands trembled as I typed back. When? Today? This afternoon? There's a coffee shop on King Street. Harborside Cafe, 2 p.m. I hesitated, thinking about Sophie's accusations, about how this would look, about everything that was spiraling out of control. Then I thought about Michael's words last night. She could be implicated as an accomplice. Whatever Sophie thought of me, whatever names she called me, she was still my daughter. And if she was in danger, real, legal danger, I couldn't just stand by. I'll be there, I typed. The rest of the morning crawled by. I tried to distract myself with coffee, with television, with anything but my phone. But every few minutes, I'd check social media, watch the view count on that video climb higher and higher. By noon, it had been shared over 50,000 times. By 1 o'clock, a reporter had found my address and knocked on my door. I didn't answer. By 1:45, I was standing outside Harborside Cafe, watching through the window as Michael sat at a corner table, a manila folder in front of him. He saw me and waved, his expression grave. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Whatever was in that folder, whatever he was about to tell me, I had a feeling it would change everything. Again, Michael already had 2 coffees waiting, one black, one with cream. He'd somehow guessed I'd take cream. The small gesture felt impossibly kind, in a world that had been anything but. Thank you for coming, he said, as I sat down. His eyes were tired, like he hadn't slept either. I know yesterday was a lot. That's one word for it. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. Sophie called this morning. She thinks I orchestrated the whole thing. That you and I planned some kind of ambush. He winced. I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention. I know. And I did. Whatever Michael's flaws might be, I didn't think cruelty was one of them. What did you want to show me? He opened the manila folder, pulling out documents covered in highlighted passages and handwritten notes. I've spent the last 3 months conducting deep due diligence on Ethan's company. Technova Solutions, what I found. He shook his head. Margaret, it's worse than I thought. My stomach knotted. Tell me. Technova claims to have developed proprietary AI software for healthcare management. On paper, they have contracts with 12 hospitals across 3 states, annual revenue of $8 million, and projections to triple that within 2 years. He pushed a document towarding me, a glossy prospectus with impressive graphs and testimonials. It all looks legitimate. That's what drew investors like me. But it's not. I started making calls. The first hospital they listed, never heard of Technova. The second one had signed a preliminary letter of intent, but no actual contract. The third hospital's administrator told me they'd met with Ethan once, 2 years ago, and never followed up. He pulled out more papers. Out of 12 supposed contracts, only 2 are real, and both are small pilot programs worth less than $50,000 combined. The room felt smaller suddenly. So he lied about his revenue. It's more than that. He's been doctoring financial statements, creating fake invoices, even inventing entire client companies. Michael's finger traced down a list of names. These 3 businesses don't exist. I checked corporate registries, business licenses, everything. They're shells. Probably just P.O. boxes and a website. Why would he do this? To attract investment, to secure loans from banks, to look successful enough that eventually he might actually become successful. Michael leaned back, rubbing his face. It's a house of cards, Margaret, and Sophie's name is all over it. He pulled out another document, a corporate filing sheet, there, in black and white. Sophie Reed, Collins, Chief Marketing Officer, Technova Solutions. She signed here as an officer of the company. That makes her legally liable for the company's representations. He flipped pages. And here, she co-signed a loan application that included the fraudulent revenue figures. And here, she approved a marketing campaign that made specific claims about contracts that don't exist. My vision blurred. She doesn't know. She can't know. I believe you, she probably signed whatever Ethan put in front of her, trusted him completely. His expression softened. But Margaret, when the SEC investigates, and they will, intent doesn't matter as much as we'd like to think. She put her signature on false documents. She benefited from the fraudulent loans. In the eyes of the law, she's an accomplice. I finished, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, I stared at my daughter's signature. That familiar looping she'd practiced for hours as a teenager because she wanted it to look sophisticated. My little girl, who'd once brought me dandelions and called them gold, was facing potential federal charges. How long, I asked. How long until this comes out? Could be weeks, could be months. I filed a confidential complaint with the SEC. I had to legally once I confirmed the fraud. They'll open an investigation. He paused. But there's also a chance one of Ethan's investors will notice the discrepancies and go to authorities themselves, or a bank might audit the loans. Once it starts, it'll move fast. What happens to Sophie? Best case scenario, if we can prove she had no knowledge of the fraud, she might avoid criminal charges, but she'd face civil suits from investors. Her reputation would be destroyed, and she'd likely lose everything. The house, the cars, all of it purchased with fraudulent money. And worst case, Michael's silence was answer enough. I thought about Sophie on the phone that morning, furious about embarrassment, about social media, about her wedding being ruined. She had no idea what was coming, no idea that in a few weeks or months, she might be facing not just humiliation, but handcuffs. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why not go directly to Sophie? I tried multiple times. She wouldn't return my calls, and Ethan, his jaw tightened. Ethan knows I'm onto him. He's been avoiding me, making excuses. I think that's partly why he rushed the wedding, to create this image of stability and success before everything collapses. So he used her. Yes, a terrible calm settled over me. For years I'd let Sophie push me away, accepted her shame, made myself smaller so she could feel bigger. But this was different. This wasn't about hurt feelings or social status. This was about her future, possibly her freedom. What do? I asked. Michael reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine. We find a way to separate her from this. Document that she didn't know, couldn't have known. Build a case for her innocence before the authorities do the opposite. How? I have a lawyer, one of the best defense attorneys in the Southeast. She owes me a favor. He pulled out a business card. And there's a court clerk, someone I know through my late mother's church connections. She might help us access filing records, timeline documents. That sounds expensive. Don't worry about... Michael, I looked at him directly. Why are you doing this? All of this? He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. When he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. Because someone should have done it for my mother, the law office of Patricia Chen occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower overlooking Charleston Harbor. I'd never been in a place like it. All sleek furniture and abstract art, the kind of space where even the air felt expensive. Patricia herself was a small woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper handshake. She listened to Michael's explanation without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. So your daughter has no idea she's signed fraudulent documents? She asked me. I don't believe so. Sophie's always been trusting with people she loves, sometimes too trusting. Patricia's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition. That's actually helpful. Trust can be a defense, if we can prove it was reasonable under the circumstances. Can you help her? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Maybe, but I need to be honest with you, Mrs. Collins. This won't be easy and it won't be cheap. She named a figure that made my chest tighten. My entire savings account wouldn't cover a quarter of it. I'll find a way, I said. Michael started to speak, but I cut him off with a look. He'd already done too much. I couldn't let him pay for this too. Patricia studied me for a moment. There might be another approach, if you're willing to do some of the legwork yourself. I can reduce my fees significantly. I'd need you to gather documentation, emails, text messages, anything that shows Sophie's ignorance of the fraud. Can you do that? Yes, I said, though I had no idea how. Good. I'll draw up a retainer agreement. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. But Mrs. Collins, one more thing. If your daughter finds out what you're doing and tries to stop you, for pride, or anger, or whatever reason, you need to keep going anyway. Sometimes saving someone means doing it against their will. Outside the office, Michael and I stood in the parking garage, the concrete walls making everything echo. You can't afford this, he said gently. I'll manage. Margaret, I've managed before. I was already doing calculations in my head. I could take out a loan against my house. I could go back to sewing. Maybe find more clients. There were ways. There had to be ways. He was quiet for a moment then. Let me make some calls. Over the next 2 weeks, I discovered skills I didn't know I had. It turned out that decades of managing a household on a library assistant's salary had taught me resourcefulness that translated surprisingly well to amateur detective work. I started with Linda Wu, an old colleague from my library days, who now worked as a clerk in the Charleston County Courthouse. We met for lunch at a diner near the courthouse, one of those places with cracked vinyl booths and bottomless coffee. Margaret Collins, she said, sliding into the booth opposite me. It's been what, 5 years? 6. I'd been let go during budget cuts, replaced by someone younger and cheaper. Linda, I need a favor, a big one. I explained what I needed. Access to corporate filing records, timeline documentation for Technova Solutions, anything that might show when documents were signed and by whom. Linda listened, her expression growing more concerned. That's a lot to ask. I know, and I wouldn't if it wasn't important. She stirred her coffee, thinking, is this about your daughter? I saw that video from the wedding. Heat rose to my cheeks. Yes, but this is bigger than that. Does Sophie know you're doing this? No, and she can't. Not yet. Linda was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. Give me a few days. I'll see what I can access. Michael, meanwhile, had connected me with his lawyer friend, a woman named Dr. Sarah Martinez, who specialized in financial forensics. She agreed to review Technova's documents pro bono as a favor to Michael. What I need from you, Sarah said during our first phone call, is anything Sophie might have. Emails from Ethan, texts, documents she signed, meeting notes, anything that shows what she knew and when. How am I supposed to get that? She's not talking to me. Get creative, Sarah said simply. I thought about it for 2 days. Before I remembered, Sophie's old laptop. She'd left it at my house years ago when she upgraded. Said I could use it for emails. I'd barely touched it, but Sophie had never wiped it. Never thought she'd need to. I spent 3 nights going through it. my back aching from hunching over the small screen. I found emails between Sophie and Ethan from early in their relationship. Romantic, trusting, full of her excitement about his revolutionary company. I found texts where she asked basic questions about the business, questions that showed she didn't understand the financial details. I found a contract she'd signed with a note attached. "Babe, just sign where I marked. It's standard corporate stuff." Each document I found was another piece of evidence that Sophie had been used, manipulated, that her trust had been weaponized against her. I sent everything to Sarah, who sent it to Patricia, who started building a case, but it wasn't enough. "We need something more concrete," Patricia said during a conference call. "Something that directly shows Ethan actively concealing information from Sophie." That's when Michael had an idea. "What if we could get Ethan to admit it on record?" "How?" I asked. "I could meet with him, tell him I'm reconsidering my investment withdrawal, that I want to discuss the concerns I've raised, record the conversation. South Carolina is a one-party consent state. It was risky, but we were running out of time." 3 days later, Michael met with Ethan at a downtown restaurant. I sat in Michael's car across the street, listening through his phone to the recording. As it happened in real time, Ethan's voice came through clearly, confident, smooth, the voice of a man who'd talked his way out of trouble before. "Michael, I appreciate you giving me another chance to address your concerns." 20 minutes of back and forth. Then Michael carefully, "But what about Sophie? Does she understand the creative accounting we've discussed?" A pause. Then Ethan laughed. "Sophie? God, no. She barely reads what she signs. I learned early on. Keep her focused on marketing and social media. Let me handle the numbers. It's better that way." "Better for whom?" "For everyone. What she doesn't know can't hurt her, right?" I closed my eyes, a mixture of relief and rage coursing through me. Relief that we had what we needed. Rage that this man had married my daughter while planning to use her as a shield. When Michael returned to the car, his face was grim. "We've got him." Patricia moved quickly after that. She submitted our evidence package to the SEC with a request for immunity consideration for Sophie, arguing she'd been deliberately kept in the dark by Ethan. She filed preliminary documents separating Sophie's legal liability from the company's, and she sent me a new retainer bill, significantly reduced, with a note. "Your legwork saved us hundreds of billable hours, we're even." But I'd spent almost everything I had. My savings account was down to double digits. I'd taken a second mortgage on my house. I'd sold my mother's antique sewing machine, the one thing of value I'd owned. None of it mattered, not if Sophie was safe. Late one night, 2 weeks into our investigation, Michael came to my house. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes. "It's happening," he said. "Sex is moving forward. They're going to arrest Ethan within the week." I sank onto my couch. "And Sophie? Patricia thinks she'll be cleared, but there's going to be fallout. Publicity, lawsuits, social consequences." He sat beside me. "Margaret, you saved her. She doesn't know it yet, but you did." I thought about Sophie's face at the wedding, full of contempt and embarrassment. I thought about her voice on the phone, accusing me of sabotage. "She'll hate me even more when she finds out," I whispered. Michael took my hand, the first time he'd really touched me since that dance. His palm was warm, steady. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but you'll know the truth, and someday, so will she." The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Michael's voice was tight, controlled in the way people sound when they're trying not to panic. "Turn on the news, Channel 5. I fumbled for the remote, my heart already racing. The morning anchor's face filled my screen, serious and grave beneath the headline, "Tech CEO arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." Footage rolled. Ethan in handcuffs being led from his office building, his expensive suit somehow looking shabby in the harsh sunlight. Federal agents carrying boxes of files, and then, God help me, Sophie standing in the background, her face a mask of shock and confusion. Federal agents arrested Ethan Montgomery, CEO of Technova Solutions, early this morning on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy, the anchor read. According to the ESSEC complaint, Montgomery allegedly fabricated client contracts and revenue figures to secure over $12 million in fraudulent investments and loans, The screen switched to a press conference. A stern woman in a dark suit, someone from the SEC, addressed a crowd of reporters. Mr. Montgomery engaged in a systematic pattern of deception spanning nearly 3 years. He created false documents, fabricated entire companies, and misrepresented his firm's capabilities to investors and financial institutions. A reporter called out. What about his wife? Sophie Montgomery was listed as Chief Marketing Officer. We're still investigating Mrs. Montgomery's level of involvement. No charges have been filed against her at this time. At this time, those 3 words hung in the air like a threat. My phone exploded with notifications, text messages, emails, missed calls. I ignored them all except for one. A text from an unknown number that I somehow knew was Sophie. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? My hands shook as I typed back. Sophie, I never wanted this. Please, let me help. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. Over the next 48 hours, I watched my daughter's life disintegrate in real time, broadcast across every news outlet in Charleston and beyond. The mansion she'd been so proud of, the one with the grand entrance and the imported Italian marble, had a foreclosure notice slapped on the front door. Camera crews filmed it. Sophie's Mercedes was repossessed from a grocery store parking lot while she was inside shopping. Someone posted the video online. Her social media accounts, once carefully curated displays of success and luxury, filled with vicious comments. Gold digger got what she deserved. Bet she knew the whole time. That poor mother at the wedding probably tried to warn her. That last comment was almost funny. Almost? Patricia Chen called me 3 days after Ethan's arrest. The SEC has formally declined to charge Sophie. Our evidence package was convincing. They believe she was genuinely ignorant of the fraud. Relief flooded through me. Thank God. But Margaret, she's not out of the woods. There are civil lawsuits coming. Investors who lost money will sue everyone associated with Technova, including her. She'll likely lose everything purchased with company funds. And her reputation. Patricia paused. It's going to be years before she recovers professionally, if she ever does. She's alive and free. That's what matters. You're a good mother, Patricia said softly. Better than she deserves, frankly. I didn't respond to that. Didn't know how to. Michael came over that evening with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat at my small kitchen table, so different from the elegant restaurants where he probably usually ate, and picked at Mushu pork in silence. She won't talk to me, I said finally. I've tried calling, texting, I even drove to the house, but she wouldn't answer the door. She's in shock. Her entire world just collapsed. I know. I pushed rice around my plate. Part of me wants her to know what we did, that we saved her. But another part knows it would only make things worse right now, Michael finished. She'd see it as pity, or worse, as me trying to prove she needed me. I set down my fork. She'd hate that more than anything. We sat in companionable silence. Outside my window, fireflies blinked in the darkness, simple, peaceful. Everything Sophie's life wasn't anymore. The wedding video is still going viral, Michael said. Someone made a TikTok about it, contrasting the moment when Sophie humiliated you with footage of Ethan being arrested, calling it karma and poetic justice. I winced. That's awful. It is, but Margaret... He leaned forward. People are also talking about you, about how you handled it with grace, how you didn't retaliate or gloat. There are entire threads about mothers who sacrifice everything and get nothing in return. I don't want to be a viral martyr. You're not. You're just real. In a world of Sophie's carefully curated perfection, you were always real. A week later, I was at the grocery store when I saw her. Sophie stood in the cereal aisle, staring at boxes like she'd forgotten what she came for. She wore jeans and a simple t-shirt. No designer labels, no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more like the girl I remembered. Our eyes met across the distance. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she turned her cart and walked away. I stood there holding a carton of eggs, my throat tight, watching my daughter disappear around the corner. That night, Michael called. She knows. What? Sophie knows about what we did. Patricia's paralegal accidentally CC'd her on an email thread about the evidence package. He sighed. I'm so sorry, Margaret. We were trying to wait for the right time. What did the email say? Enough. That you hired Patricia, that you gathered evidence, that we recorded Ethan's confession, that you spent your savings to protect her. My heart hammered. Has she said anything? Not to me, but Patricia said she tried to call the office. Patricia didn't answer. Thought it would be better to let Sophie process first. I barely slept that night. Every sound made me jump, thinking it was Sophie at the door, but she never came. Instead, 3 days later I found a letter in my mailbox. No envelope, just a piece of paper folded in half. Sophie's handwriting. I don't know what to say. I don't know if there's anything I can say that matters. You had every reason to let me fall. I gave you every reason, but you saved me anyway. I'll never understand why. I'll never forgive myself for what I said, for how I treated you. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just need you to know that I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No signature. Just those words in her familiar looping script. I read it 17 times, standing in my driveway, tears streaming down my face. Michael found me there an hour later, still holding the letter, unable to move. She came, I whispered. She was here. He read the letter over my shoulder, then gently guided me inside, made me tea, sat with me while I cried, not from sadness, but from something more complicated, relief maybe, or the beginning of hope. What do I do? I asked. Whatever feels right, he said. There's no manual for this. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I wrote back, just a single line on a postcard that I left in her mailbox. I know and I love you anyway, always have, always will, Mom. The next morning, my phone rang. Sophie's name on the screen. I answered and heard my daughter crying on the other end of the line. She came to my house on a Thursday evening, just as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. I'd been watering my tomato plants, the ones I grew in plastic containers on my small patio, because I'd never had enough yard for a proper garden. My hands were dirty, my clothes old and comfortable, my hair unwashed. I'd stopped trying to look presentable weeks ago. The knock was soft, tentative, like she wasn't sure she had the right to knock at all. When I opened the door, I barely recognized her. Sophie had lost weight, not in a healthy way, but in the way of someone who'd forgotten to eat, who'd been consumed by stress and fear. Her clothes hung loose. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. The glossy, confident woman from the wedding had been replaced by someone smaller, more fragile. We stood there in the doorway, neither speaking, the evening air thick with cicada song and unspoken words. Then Sophie's face crumpled, and she dropped to her knees, right there on my doorstep. Mom, she choked out. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I froze, my dirty hands still dripping with water, my heart breaking and mending simultaneously. Every instinct screamed at me to pull her up, to tell her it was okay, to make it better the way I'd done when she was small and had scraped her knee or lost a spelling bee. But I didn't. Not yet. Some things needed to be said first. Come inside, I said quietly. She stood on shaky legs and followed me into my small living room, the one she'd once been embarrassed to have friends see. I gestured to the worn couch, and she sat, perched on the edge like she might bolt at any moment. I lowered myself into my reading chair, the one with the permanent dent from years of my body, and waited. I treated you like garbage, Sophie said, her voice raw. Not just at the wedding, for years. I was ashamed of you, of where I came from, of everything you'd done for me. Tears streamed down her face. And when everything fell apart, when I lost everything, you were the one who saved me. You spent your savings. You hired lawyers. You fought for me when I didn't deserve it. You're my daughter. That's not enough. Her voice broke. That shouldn't be enough after what I did, after what I said. I called you a failure in front of 300 people. I put you at that terrible table like you were nothing, like you were... Sophie, my voice was firm. Stop. She looked up at me, her eyes desperate and lost. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt, I continued. It did. Every word, every dismissive look, every time you pretended you didn't see me. It hurt more than I can explain. She made a sound like a wounded animal. But I also understand something you don't yet. You were trying to run from your past because you thought it defined you. You thought being poor, being from a small house, with second-hand furniture and a mother who couldn't afford the things your friends' mothers could. You thought that made you less than. I was wrong. Yes, you were. But you were also young and scared and trying to build a life that felt safe. And Ethan, I paused, choosing my words carefully. Ethan exploited that. He saw your insecurity and used it. That doesn't excuse what you did to me, but it explains it. Sophie buried her face in her hands. I'll never forgive myself. You don't have to. I stood and crossed to the couch, sitting beside her. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or pretending it didn't happen. It's about choosing to move forward anyway. She looked at me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. How can you even look at me? Because I see all of you. Sophie, the woman who hurt me. Yes, but also the little girl who used to make me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. Burnt toast and all. The teenager who cried on my shoulder when that boy broke her heart. The daughter who, despite everything, is still my daughter. She collapsed against me, then sobbing into my shoulder the way she used to when she was small and the world felt too big and scary. I held her, my own tears finally falling, and rocked her gently. I lost everything, she whispered. The house, the car, my career, everyone I thought was my friend disappeared. I have nothing left. You have yourself, I said. And now, if you want it, you have me. We sat like that until the sun had fully set, and my living room was dark except for the street light filtering through the curtains. Eventually, Sophie pulled back, wiping her eyes. What do I do now? She asked. How do I come back from this? One day at a time, one choice at a time. I squeezed her hand. And maybe by helping others who are where you used to be, over the next weeks. Sophie moved into my spare bedroom, the tiny room she'd once occupied as a child, now serving as her sanctuary as an adult. We fell into a routine, morning coffee together, quiet conversations, slow healing. She started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown, helping mothers who were struggling with poverty and abuse. I watched her transform as she worked with women who reminded me of myself, women who were fighting against a world that didn't value their sacrifices. They're so strong, Sophie told me one evening after a shift. This one woman, Maria, she has 3 kids and works 2 jobs and still finds time to help other women in the shelter. She reminds me of you. I'm not that strong. Yes, you are. You always have been. I was just too blind to see it. Michael visited regularly, always bringing food or books, or just his quiet presence. Sophie watched us together with something like wonder. He cares about you, she said one night after Michael had left. Really cares. We're friends, she smiled. A real smile, the first I'd seen in months. Mom, I've seen the way he looks at you. That's not friendship. That's something more. I felt my cheeks warm. It's complicated. Why? Because you think you're too old. Because you think you don't deserve it. She took my hand. You deserve everything good, Mom. Everything. And if Michael Reed makes you happy, then stop talking yourself out of it. Later that night, lying in bed, I thought about Michael. About the way he made me feel seen, valued, interesting, about how he never made me feel small or less than, about how, for the first time in decades, I might be ready to let someone in. 6 months had passed since Ethan's arrest, since Sophie had come home, since my world had been turned upside down and somehow rearranged into something better. Sophie had found her footing at the women's shelter, working as their volunteer coordinator and helping to organize fundraising events. She'd moved into a small apartment near downtown. Nothing fancy, but hers, earned through her own work. She smiled more now, real smiles that reached her eyes. And Michael had become woven into the fabric of my days in ways I'd stopped trying to resist. We met for coffee every Tuesday morning at Harborside Cafe, our cafe now, the place where everything had changed. We took walks along the Battery on Sunday afternoons, watching sailboats drift past historic mansions. We talked about everything and nothing, his work, my tomato plants, books we'd read, dreams we'd abandoned and found again. But he'd never pushed for more, never suggested we were anything beyond friends, despite what Sophie and everyone else seemed to see, until tonight. I have something to ask you, he'd said on the phone that morning. Can I take you to dinner, somewhere special? My stomach had fluttered in a way I'd thought I was too old to feel. Of course. Now I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting a dress I'd bought specifically for tonight. The first new dress I'd purchased for myself in years, navy blue, simple but elegant, with a neckline that Sophie had insisted was perfect, Mom, trust me. Sophie appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a knowing smile. You look beautiful. I look old. You look like someone about to have the most important dinner of her life, she corrected. And for the record, Michael is the lucky one here. A car horn sounded outside. My heart jumped. Go, Sophie said, shooing me toward the door. And Mom, whatever happens tonight, let yourself be happy. You've earned it. Michael had chosen a restaurant I'd only seen from the outside, the kind of place with white tablecloths and candles, and a view of Charleston Harbor that took your breath away. The host greeted him by name and led us to a private table by the window. This is too much, I whispered as we sat down. It's not nearly enough, he replied, his eyes holding mine. We ordered food I barely tasted, made conversation that flowed as easily as it always did, but underneath it all something hummed. Anticipation, nervousness, possibility. After dinner, Michael suggested a walk on the beach. We drove to Sullivan's Island, parked near the lighthouse, and walked along the shore. The moon hung full and bright, painting a silver path across the water. Do you remember the wedding? Michael asked after a while. When I asked you to pretend, I'm not likely to forget it. He stopped walking. Turning to face me, the wind caught his hair, and in the moonlight, he looked younger, more vulnerable. I've been thinking about that night a lot lately, about how I told you to pretend we were together. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against my palm. Margaret, I don't want to pretend anymore. My breath caught. Michael, let me finish, please. He squeezed my hand gently. These past 6 months with you have been the best of my life. You make me laugh. You challenge me. You see the world in ways that remind me why it's worth caring about. His voice grew thick with emotion. When I'm with you, I feel like I'm home, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Tears blurred my vision. I'm almost 60 years old. I have a complicated daughter, a tiny house, and no money. I can't give you the life you're used to. I don't want the life I'm used to. I want you. He cupped my face in his hands. I want Tuesday morning coffees and Sunday walks. I want to help you with your tomato plants and listen to you talk about the books you're reading. I want to be there when Sophie calls with good news. And I want to hold you when she inevitably drives you crazy again. I laughed through my tears. She will definitely do that. I know, and I can't wait. He brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. Margaret Collins, I'm 53 years old, and I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You scare me and inspire me and make me want to be better, and I am completely, utterly in love with you. The world seemed to stop. The waves, the wind, my own heartbeat, everything suspended in that perfect, impossible moment. You're not saying anything, he said, his voice wavering slightly. That's terrifying. I'm scared, I whispered. I'm scared that this is a dream or a mistake or something that can't last. So am I. But Margaret, the best things in life are scary. They're scary because they matter. He pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box. I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. Not until you're ready. But I am asking you to stop pretending this isn't real. To stop talking yourself out of happiness because you think you don't deserve it. He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small sapphire. The color of my eyes, he would later tell me. This is a promise, he said. A promise that I'm here, that I'm staying, and that I will spend however long you'll let me proving that you are worth everything. I looked at the ring. Then at this man who'd appeared in my life like something out of a story, who'd defended me when I needed it most, who'd fought beside me to save my daughter, who'd seen all my broken pieces and decided they were beautiful. Yes, I breathed. Yes to coffee and walks and tomato plants and everything. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and then he was kissing me, soft and gentle and full of promise. The waves crashed behind us, and somewhere in the distance, the lighthouse beams swept across the water, guiding ships safely home. When we finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing, I rested my forehead against his. How did this happen? I asked. How did the worst night of my life turn into this? Magic, he said with a smile. Or maybe just two people who were brave enough to stop pretending. Sophie was waiting up when I got home, curled on my couch with a cup of tea. She took one look at my face, at the ring on my finger, and burst into happy tears. "I knew it," she said, hugging me tight. "I absolutely knew it. I'm still figuring it out," I admitted. "That's okay. You have time." She pulled back, smiling. "And Mom, thank you." "For what?" "For showing me what real love looks like. Not the fairy tale kind from my wedding, but the real kind. The kind that saves people and forgives them and shows up even when it's hard." She squeezed my hand. "You taught me that love isn't about pretending to be perfect. It's about being real." Later, alone in my room, I looked at the ring on my finger, at the moonlight streaming through my window, at the simple life I'd built from nothing but determination and love. Someone once asked me how I met Michael, how this unlikely love story began. I smiled and told them the truth. It all started when a stranger walked up to me and said, "Pretend you're with me." But the pretending ended the moment it began. Everything after that was real, and it was more beautiful than any fairy tale I'd ever known.